Thank you so much for viewing this recording of a presentation that I gave earlier this week regarding the end of term, how to finish strong in your online courses. Although the information in this presentation is geared towards those online courses, I think much of it is certainly applicable for those who teach face-to-face. You know, the end of term or the end of semester, as it may be, is a frenetic time for everyone, faculty and students for sure. Also, us as staff, you know, we have our own tasks and things that we need to deal with. But of course, the focus is on teaching and learning, and what can we do to make for a really great student experience, and how we can sort of solidify that student experience in the last few weeks of a course. So most of the information that I'm going to talk about today comes from the Online Teaching Survival Guide from Bottcher and Conrad. And that's a 2016 book that you could find on AbeBooks or Thrift Books for between $5 to $10. I think it's a very worthy investment. And also, we may have some copies for loan. So if you want to get in touch with me, chris.daniel@eku.edu, and ask about that, be more than happy to try to see if I can acquire one for you to check out. When I think about engagement, and that's not only a buzzword, that is probably, I would say, core and key to how to make for a successful online student experience, and probably a student experience in general. Engagement is not necessarily the responsibility of the student. I mean, there is a great responsibility that they have to themselves in terms of their learning. But in terms of really seeking that involvement and attracting them to what's going on in the course, engagement is an action verb that requires instructor initiation and activity. So I like this definition: to occupy, attract, or involve someone else's interest or attention, in this case our students. And one framework I saw for that talked about the 4 C's: connect, communicate, collaborate, co-facilitate. We first have to make that strong and very open and friendly connection with our students. And there are lots of ways to do that. I like a couple of different ways. And then we have to keep those channels of communications open in positive and organic ways, but we have to do it intentionally too. So it's a challenge. In most courses, we want students to collaborate with us and with each other relative to the instructional goals that you've given. And then lastly, we want to help them in most courses to be co-facilitators of their own learning and of the activities that are extant in the course. So I think thinking about engagement in terms of these 4 C's can be helpful for many. Second of all, we want to know what to look for when we're talking about student engagement. So, you know, there's a piece they have to come with too. It's a dance that we do, the instructor-student dance, as it were. And there's some things we want to look at to verify that they are engaging themselves and engaging the material and engaging each other and engaging you. And so there are 3 dimensions that the literature talks about. One is a cognitive engagement. And that's the extent to which students are attending to and spending mental effort on the tasks of learning that they are encountering in your course. Are they curious? Do they want to understand the content? Do they have a psychological engagement? Are they intellectually investing themselves in the learning? Do they use strategies that lead to deep learning? And we could talk about metacognitive strategies and learning strategies for a long, long time. Not really the focus of this presentation. The second sort of engagement is behavioral. And those are things that deal with the extent to which students are making active responses to the learning tasks. Are they asking or answering questions? Are they involved in the class? This literature talks about going to class, but in the online context, are they participating in discussion boards? Do you see some evidence of daily activity? Are they paying attention? Can you tell that the content that they are giving back, is it reflective of the fact that they are beginning to grasp the content? And then there's that affective engagement, dealing with their emotional investment and reactions to the learning task. Do they care about their learning? Is there a genuine interest or enthusiasm or an excitement about what they're doing? Do they seem to be motivated and challenged by these new things that you're presenting? And are they willing participants in that learning process? So all things to think about, and Of course, these two slides don't really do it justice, but that's what we're really looking for as we end the term. We're looking for that engagement that we have to initiate and keep active, and we're looking for them to be willing, active participants in that process. So here's some engagement best practices, and I would submit to you that if you're doing these things from the beginning of the term and you continue to do them to the end of the term, you probably have your end of term problem mostly solved. And so you can pause and read this list, and I'm just going to briefly mention them. So first of all, are you setting the tone for your online presence from day one? I happen to use a product called Flipgrid. It's now called Flip, and it is a asynchronous video and other communications tool. It's very easy to integrate into Blackboard, and from day one, that evening of day one, I start my Flip up and I just talk to the students. It's usually late at night. I'm often in a t-shirt. Sometimes I'll throw on a polo shirt, and I just talk to them about the course, and in 2 to 3 minutes just give some thoughts and tell them about who I am and what's going on in my day. I want a casual, approachable presence, and that's just me. It can vary for different people. I have mainly graduate students, so I want them to see me more as a peer, somebody who's working alongside them to help them reach their own goals and aspirations relative to instructional design, which is my particular area of expertise. So set that tone right away. Also, you got to demonstrate your daily presence in the course. You have to do things that show them, hey, this instructor's really there every day, whether it's an impromptu comment in terms of one person's discussion board post. And you don't have to micromanage these or helicopter the forums all the time. But it could be something as simple as getting an early start on grading that for projects or assignments that were submitted. Anything that you can do to show that you are really there in the course. You should seek real-time formative feedback. I do something called Smile Sheets every week of my course. It's a 2-question survey. It's really more like a questionnaire that asks them how satisfied they are. Actually, this term, I did 3 questions. How satisfied are you? How hard do you feel like the material was? And what went well, what could have gone better? And that's an open-ended question. And about half the class, sometimes more, responds to those. And it really allows me to take the pulse of what's going on in my courses. And also, I can course correct. For example, many of the class thought that I had too many discussion boards, and particularly one week where we had heavy assignments, they didn't like the fact that I had a discussion board. So I threw it out. And it seemed like that was the right thing to do. The course wasn't going to suffer as a result of them not doing that one assignment. And I believe the students gave me stronger output on the midterm assignment that I did make. So sometimes it's good to be able to course correct, and not just to satisfy the students, but to do the things that you think are going to make the greatest impact in terms of their learning. Toward that end, you have to give timely feedback to students, especially in an 8-week term. Waiting a whole week, almost until another assignment is due, and certainly well into the time where they should be working on the assignment, is really too late to give feedback on a prior assignment. We really need to try as quickly as we can, and really as soon as assignments that are submitted, to start grading and start giving that important feedback. Students want that, and also they need it relative to many of the assignments that build on one another. So I'd urge you to consider how to build in timely feedback into your own schedule. Offer virtual office hours and meetings, and show up to them. Don't wait for the students to connect or email you about them. Just be present. Sometimes that can be by phone call, but I prefer Zoom, or with the advent of Microsoft Teams, it's extremely easy to go ahead and start a meeting or make a standing calendar appointment that is connected to Microsoft Teams, and then just go into that appointment notification or instance and start your meeting. Students will appreciate that, and about half my course, this last course, took me up on that at some point in the term. We need to nudge those students who are not engaging in the course, and we should do that early and often. we should give them every opportunity to engage in the course. And as we know in online courses, more of the impetus and the motivation is necessary on the part of the student. And that is true, but at the same time, we need to do our own due diligence to, if we see that they're not responding to discussion boards in a timely manner, if they're running late on multiple assignments, it's really important to just send an email or maybe even a phone call or a message, just asking them what's going on. And you notice that they're not completing assignments like they should, or you notice they're not in the course as often as some of the others. That contact that you make, if done in a friendly and non-judgmental way, as most of us do, is really going to make great strides towards getting those students back into the thick of things. And if you do that early, you won't have those problems, or you'll have fewer of them as you move towards the end of the term. And then I like to send personalized check-in messages with each student, regardless of what is going on with their academic progress, 1 or 2 times a term. Just a quick email saying, hey, how are you doing? I noticed this thing about you, or I noticed that thing about you, or a really good job. Steve Dwinell's made mention of a tactic and something he heard from a faculty member. Don't forget your good students too. Those top performers want your mentorship, want your expertise, want that connection with somebody who's got experience in the field, even if they're doing great. So just keep that in mind. And all these are from Iowa State. You can go to the site at the end of this presentation. It's in the references if you want more information. So everything starts with you. If you're organized, if you front load content per your course schedule. Yes, I make announcements sometimes several weeks before they're actually to go out, and I front load them in my Blackboard course. I don't let students see them. And then if it's time for week 4 Monday's announcement, I oftentimes have that ready, and I can go and submit that, and it sends an email out to students, and they get that message, and I don't have to think about it. And that's a nice time saver if I can bank those up when I do have time. If I know what's going to be happening in week 4, I can just go ahead and write that message and send that out. And so you need to show you care and make yourself available. If you do many of the things in the last slide, that's going to really come through. And most of you who are in academia have a great care and passion for your students. And so you just need to wear that on your sleeve a little bit more. And there's some other tactics that we can think about. And the graphic on this slide, it deals with what we call the community of inquiry. And it's a framework or a model for considering what the ultimate education experience is. And it consists of what we call cognitive presence, which is the core content. It's engaging the content. It's the teaching presence. It's what you bring to the online environment in terms of your knowledge, expertise, and ability to mentor and foster students' goals and aspirations. And then it's that social presence. It's how we engage, faculty engage students, and students engage each other. And it's multidimensional. Lots more on that if you're interested in really understanding that framework and how it can change not only your online teaching, but your face-to-face teaching. Let me know. I actually teach a graduate course that features this quite a bit. I'm glad to share information with you. And there are some quick reads you can get at that make the whole process much more straightforward than it sometimes is. So the first main tip I would offer you is to write your timeline and write their timeline. You know, you're an expert in what it takes to be successful in your subject area. And so as you're considering the entire course with regard to the last 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks, what do they need to be doing? And write that timeline out and write how you would approach each assignment, each reading. And I know that's pretty verbose, but there are some students who are gasping. They feel like they're drowning in work, and oftentimes they, as adult learners, most of them, they've got so many other things going on besides just coursework. And they also often have other courses to think about. So what is a straightforward approach to finishing up the term? And if you could share that with your students, that's going to go a long way for some of them. For some of them, it may make the difference between a passing grade and a failing grade, or a much better grade as opposed to, a less strong grade. And it's not just about the grade, but the experience could be richer as well. And also do the same for yourself relative to your course, this particular course. What are the things you need to do? There's a lot of research behind making lists and sticking to them, and that can be a powerful tool. And certainly as professionals and faculty who've probably been doing this a lot longer than me, you probably have a way of organizing your thoughts and your tasks. But I think a timeline is something very worthy of my time, and it's something that I am trying to do a better job with each successive class that I teach. And so just communicate those in whatever way you feel is important. You may even shoot a quick video with the timeline on the screen and go through each step of it. I think that can be very powerful, especially if you keep that pretty short. And just keep in communication with your students. Another concept is stress, and everybody deals with stress, but I think students, some of them, deal with panic. And stress and pressure is one thing, and certainly as we get older, many of us figure out strategies that work for us. But with students, especially younger folks, I think it's new. A lot of these pressures are new, and they don't know how to navigate certain situations. So here are some tips from the book, as well as some other sources, about how to deal with helping them manage their own stress and panic. First of all, refer to prior work and artifacts. So many of your students did a great job on assignments that came before the things that they're going to do at the end of term. I know in my classes we have a midterm project that's substantial but not terrible, and then we have a final project that is extremely involved. In almost every course that we teach, it's this way. And so what I tend to do is tell them to, and look at with them their various projects and their work that they've completed before now, and just reminded them of their success. You can also talk about ways that they can improve, ways they can become more efficient at working, but just let them know that, hey, you've been successful. You're going to be successful now. Just try to get on a schedule and start early on your work and pace through it. That's a good life tip, but sometimes we tend to forget these things when we're talking about academic work. Then if you've created that timeline, refer to the timeline you created and just say, look, we're at week 6 now. There are 2 weeks to go, and you probably should be here. And if you are, great. Then follow these steps through, and that should take you to the end. Or work with me, and we'll devise some sort of timeline that may work for you. I know that if you have dozens and dozens of students, that tactic doesn't work as well. However, I would remind you that in eCampus courses, in large sections, you have a facilitator. Utilize that facilitator using what we call the full facilitator model. And that's where those facilitators are responsible for their portion of the students. And eCampus has done that in order to provide that rich interaction experience with somebody who's more knowledgeable than the student relative to the subject matter. So get them involved too, doing some of these things, and it will lift your load considerably and it will provide a better experience for everybody. Third, you could mention multiple opportunities. Third, you should offer multiple opportunities for feedback and connection. If you're doing regular office hours, certainly that's a time. I'm using Microsoft Teams in my classes moving forward, and I find that that's extremely powerful. Some faculty don't like that because it makes them feel like they're on call or they can be paged whenever. I guess it's different for me because I'm a staff member. I don't know, but I don't mind any time a student wants to instant message me. That's not a guarantee that I'm going to answer that message right away. In fact, I tell students, I have an 8 to 4:30 job and often beyond. And so if I'm engaged in something for that full-time job, yes, that's going to have to take priority. But it's nothing for me to get a message. Like oftentimes this has happened. I've been on the couch watching a show with my wife, and it's nothing for me to just give a quick response, or heck, even pause the show if I need to give a more detailed response. Students always appreciate that. Now, granted, the numbers of my courses are lower than most, and we're a growing program, but that personal connection is always appreciated. I find that students don't generally abuse those types of things. I've had faculty before, or some of the nursing faculty have given their cell phone numbers to students, and I found they rarely abuse that, very, very rarely. So if that's your concern, I would want to talk with you to see how I can maybe convince you, not necessarily to give your cell phone numbers, but that having an open channel is a benefit and not a hindrance. And third of all, of course, we know that EKU has many resources devoted to mental health, recreation, and also the library is just a font of things going on all the time. So I like to get involved when I'm teaching a class and kind of know the counseling center information. In fact, if you go to the counseling center's website, I think it's counseling.eku.edu, they have an on-call mental health service for students in crisis. And so that's one resource that I think students need to be aware of. The library always has activities. Campus Rec Center always has activities students can engage in that will help them de-stress. And of course, for online, that's not as that's not as available. The library and librarians are always available. But just get in touch with the resources that we have online. Our coordinators can help guide you there, so please get in touch with them and communicate to the students that they do have places they can turn when they're feeling stress or panic, and that they can get help. Let's talk about discussion boards for just a second. It's a topic unto itself. But if you get students talking, if you get them involved in discourse early, they'll engage in that discourse moving forward through the end of the term. And when we talk about discussion boards and getting them involved in discourse, we have to write the appropriate questions and prompts that do some of the things that are on the screen here. If you give them a question where the answers are straightforward and there's only one or two correct answers, you will find that it's just going to become an exercise in participation and not in deep thinking. By the same token, these discussion boards should not be miniature research papers. I've seen this all too often in certain disciplines. They're not, the instructor's not asking for discourse. They're asking for a 2 to 3 page paper that's posted as a discussion board where students offer feedback on reading a 2 to 3 page paper. And that's generally pretty boring, and it's not going to fulfill the requirement that a community of inquiry is to have that rich engagement and discussion. Now, if you want to write papers and have people give feedback on papers, that's one thing. I'm not necessarily arguing that's a terrible idea, but it's not going to solicit the kind of engagement that rich discussion boards will. And if you think that we still don't use text as a primary mode of communication, all you have to do is look at internet services such as Reddit, Discord, even Facebook. Text is still the lingua franca of the internet, and it will be probably for some time. People like typing. Now, is it formal academic writing? Absolutely not. I'm suggesting that we have sort of a mix here. We want students to naturally communicate and do so with full freedom of expression. Sometimes that's going to mean your grammar is not 100% perfect English, but I think it's important to make those discussions as realistic as you can. And so really what we're talking about is promoting divergent thinking. And so you want discussion boards that are doing that. And you probably want answers that you wouldn't have anticipated. You want to ask questions that you may not know all the answers to, or where the student perspective and experience is very important. You should encourage analysis, though. I'm not saying that this is a free-for-all, a true free-for-all. There should be some analysis that is involved, or at the very least allow students to offer how their perspective and personal experience colors how they view the particular topic. Ask them to draw from those experiences. So these are just some tips, and if you want more information about how to write discussion board questions, there's so much written on it, and I have some quick links available to send you. All you got to do is just send email to chris.daniel@eku.edu. I'd be glad to get that your way. So, talking about talking, Microsoft Teams will see greater adoption as we move ahead in the online world, and especially as faculty start using the new learning management system from Blackboard called Ultra. Ultra is new. We're not pushing that at this point, but we're starting to see slow but steady adoption, and eventually, not in the next couple years, maybe not in the next 4 to 5 years, but at some point, if we stay with Blackboard, everyone will be using Ultra. And Teams is integrated into Ultra, and you can even get IT to create a team for your current course, even if you're not an Ultra user. It's a game changer for me. I know many faculty are not excited at the prospect of being persistently connected to something like Ultra. And that's complete user choice, but I can tell you that the students I've worked with love it. It's easy for them to talk to each other. They can start ad hoc meetings in their own team. They can ask me a question in a general channel. We can sidebar it to a text chat. And I find that taking 5 or 10 minutes on Teams can solve a lot of problems that may fester for a few days if I'm just exchanging a relatively snail-paced email with them. So I would really suggest exploring that if you think that it's within your capacity and desire to do so. When we talk about the end-of-course experience, one other way of looking at it from the literature are these 3 dimensions. And one is a content dimension relative to the end of course. Another is an interaction dimension. And then a third one is the full course experience. And so I want to explain these just a little bit and allow you to reflect on that if you like. But before that, as you get towards the end of the term, in that last week, find a way to celebrate. There are all sorts of ways that I'll talk about, but even if you just have a Zoom meeting to just say goodbye, to mention some of the many accomplishments that your students have done relative to your course, and just the fact that they finished. Many of you all teach very complex subjects to students, and they do very well with it because of your experience and what you've brought to the table. And it's been a job for everybody, and you should revel in that. And I'm going to give you some ways to do that. So as you do that, whether it's asynchronously or synchronously, one thing you can consider relative to wrapping up the term is what do you want to say about the content? First of all, I think you should affirm core concepts and prune more complicated ones. So for example, if you were to send a message or mention to students, remember class, if you remember nothing else, keep these concepts that are core and key to this course and the discipline in mind. And then if you can state 3 to 5 fundamental and powerful concepts of the course, that's something those students can hang their hat on weeks, months, years after they've taken that course. And if you've done all the other things right relative to engagement, they will remember those things. We feel pretty strongly about that. Second of all, it's your sort of turn to say, look, I'm not the expert on every single aspect of what we just reviewed in this course, and here are the journals that I keep up with to maintain my expertise and to know this aspect of my field. Here are the professional organizations I'm engaged in. In my discipline, we have several, and I love it when students take an interest and they join the Association of Talent Development. That's a great professional organization that I believe will lead students right into a job or at least a really solid relationship with an industry professional who's invested in helping them. Part of that organization's service mission is to students and learners. So talk about those professional organizations that they can join. Many don't cost very much for a student membership. And so it's a great opportunity for those who really want to take their knowledge and experience to the next level. And then any other persistent sources that you might use, like there are several Twitter accounts that I send students to, and there are certain blogs that I like for them to look at if they're interested in things. So I take an opportunity at the end to just show them that and talk about it. Remind students that they need to keep making connections to the content that you introduce to them, and to share. You might ask them to share one meaningful insight towards the end of the class, so that they're thinking about how what they learned changed how they think and what they're gonna how they're gonna proceed moving forward. Another thing you could do to celebrate in terms of content, or in the course in terms of content, is invite a guest speaker. That's a great way to not only introduce them to the fact that this is a real field that people do for a living, and I don't care what it is. I don't care how esoteric or involved your subject may be. Surely you know an expert that would come for 30, 45 minutes and just have a discussion with your class, or give a brief presentation. And also, it's really gratifying when an industry professional sort of verifies and ratifies what you've tried to show students in class. It really drives the concepts home, and I think it makes a big difference. Think about interaction and social experience. I've got guest speaker listed here twice. Maybe I shouldn't, but also, that can be a really social experience too. Or to invite them to, at the end of the term, to a professional meeting. Like we have one going on tonight. It would be appropriate to invite students to that. And we're going to talk about the power of MOOCs. And so, you could do that. Another silly thing to maybe do is to get on Spotify and have students submit a particular song that they like, and you don't have to play that in a live session, but you could give them that playlist. EKU just did one for homecoming, and I think that was a pretty successful solicitation and offering that you can just give to people for no extra money, and it's something that may just spark remembrances of the class. You can ask them to do a reflective writing. In fact, in addition to any meetings that we have, that's a non-graded mandatory requirement. We're just asking them to share some thoughts about what went really well for them, where are some areas that they could have improved for themselves, how could we have improved things in the course. I just think that gives more information than what a course evaluation gives. And I think course evals are still very important, but sometimes we need to ask and we want to know more. And so a reflective writing can give us some qualitative data that may be of great use as we reflect on our own practice. Discuss the final project or exam. It's a great time to debrief as well. And it doesn't have to be live, but I think you're going to get more natural responses if you did a synchronous session on Zoom or using Microsoft Teams. Ask students what's next. Is everyone moving along as a cohort, or are we parting ways possibly forever or until next time? It's perfectly fine to end a course where we say, well, we'll see you someday, or we'll see you next time. But also, if they're moving forward together, what are some of their group plans? What are some of their individual plans? And how does that relate to the community that you created during this term? Students may want to share their contact information. You may mention that, you may not, just depending on your students. And of course, that's completely at their preference. Next thing to think about is the full course experience. You should absolutely encourage evaluations. That's often the only data point that we have as an institution, as a department, or individually in terms of how the students saw and valued what your course offered and ways that you can improve. But I think asking for that deeper feedback, whether it's a separate survey or if it's asking for reflections or if it's just meeting face to face via Zoom and asking, what went well, what could have gone better. But you can ask some pointed questions like, what was the most useful resource that they had as part of this course? Did they encounter problems with the learning tools? Was it a problem of their own lack of knowledge or understanding, or was it something functionally wrong with the tool? That's important information that the evaluations get at, sort of, but they don't ask that specific question. Ask them what they would change about what they did in the course and what the course was about. You'll get some very useful insights, or at least I have. Then ask them if they're ready for the course content. What could you do to help prepare students to get started? And we might consider a pre-training or a pre-introductory module to really help students get acquainted with the concepts and the skills that they'll need in order to be successful in the course. One extremely important element is that you review and reflect along the way, but also at the end of term. I like to take my course evaluations and read them. I like to go back and look at the survey data that I have from the Smile Sheet surveys, the 3-question surveys that I give, and I take notes and I try to remind myself what I'd like to do the next time I teach this course. And so I know all of you as academics do reflection on some level, but I like to do it specifically for the courses that I offer, and go through a deliberate process. And sometimes it's not quite as deliberate. Maybe I'll take a walk and I'll think about something that was said or done in a course, and I'll jot that down really quickly and look at it later. But have some reflection practice relative to the experience that you had, the experience you think your students have, and how you'd like to make changes or additions or subtractions down the road. This is a reference list. I'll paste that in the web page on our IDC site so that you won't have to type out big long URLs. And certainly I hope you'll get in touch with me if you have any questions or concerns. We'd really love to hear from you. And thank you so much for your time and attention today.